The room fell silent the moment her hand struck my face. It was not just the sting of skin against skin that cut through me, but the weight of every eye fixed on us. A ballroom filled with polished glass and glittering chandeliers froze as if time itself had stopped. My cheek burned, but the deeper fire came from the humiliation of being hit on my own birthday, in front of family, friends, and strangers who thought they knew us. The silence stretched so long it felt like the air itself refused to move. I could see faces trying to process what they had just witnessed. Some mouths hung open, others twisted into nervous smiles, and a few eyes darted away as if pretending nothing had happened would make it less real. My mother clutched her wine glass tighter. My father shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Even the band, half hidden behind their instruments, waited for a cue they did not know how to follow. The slap was not just a strike, it was a declaration. A reminder that my sister had always claimed the stage, even when it was not hers to take. For a brief second I considered lowering my head, swallowing the shame and letting her win once again. That was the old pattern. She cut, I bled, and the world nodded along as if her cruelty was charming. But something inside me shifted in that frozen silence. The pain became fuel, the humiliation turned sharp, and instead of breaking me, it gave me clarity. I felt the weight of every year she had pushed me into the shadows, every moment she had twisted the truth into mockery. Then came the laugh. It started small, low in my chest, almost surprising me as much as it shocked everyone else. But it grew, rolling out into the room, cutting through the silence sharper than the slap itself. It was not the laugh of someone broken. It was the laugh of someone who had finally seen the game for what it was. Heads turned, whispers spread, and for the first time it was not her performance that held the room. It was my refusal to bow. That laugh told the truth her slap could never hide. And in that instant, everything began to change. The ballroom sparkled like a scene cut from a glossy magazine. Walls of glass framed the city lights outside, while inside every table was set with crystal flutes and silver polished so bright it could blind you. The chandeliers above glowed with a warmth that seemed to promise joy, and for anyone walking in it looked like the perfect place to celebrate life and family. Laughter floated over the music. Cameras flashed, and guests moved from table to table with smiles that looked flawless. On the surface, it had all the trappings of elegance. My mother had arranged every detail to perfection, down to the flowers that matched the frosting on cakes too beautiful to cut. Guests posed with their drinks raised, leaning into one another as if they shared unshakable bonds. But standing in that room, I felt the tension humming louder than the music. It was the kind of tension you do not need words to notice. Every smile carried weight. Behind the polite gestures was a current of comparison, envy, and unspoken judgment. My family had become skilled actors in a play that demanded unity, but the cracks in the stage were wide enough to swallow the truth whole. I caught my father glancing at my sister more often than me, even when he tried to hide it. My mother's laugh at every one of her remarks was too quick, too eager, as if she needed to reinforce the illusion. It struck me that guests probably believed they were witnessing a family tied by love and achievement. They saw the gowns, the uniforms, the applause. They could not see how fragile it all was. To them, this was a milestone. To me, it was theater, a room full of masks that might shatter if anyone pressed too hard. The more perfect the setting appeared, the sharper the edges of what lay underneath. I moved through the party, greeting relatives who remembered the version of me that existed before years of service changed me. They spoke kind words, asked safe questions, and then shifted their eyes to her, drawn the way moths are drawn to flame. I knew the choreography by heart. I played my role, shook hands, nodded at compliments, and kept my voice steady. But inside, I felt like a soldier walking through enemy lines, calm on the outside, alert to every subtle move. The surface glittered, but the cracks were already there. They showed in the way my sister's eyes flicked toward me, daring me to react to her presence. They showed in the way no one else wanted to disturb the fragile peace by acknowledging the rivalry. Everyone preferred the mask to the truth, but masks never last forever. And that night in that perfect ballroom, the fractures waited just beneath the shine, demanding to be seen. Victoria could fill a room without raising her voice. People leaned toward her as if their attention belonged to her by instinct. She moved with a calm that looked like kindness, and most nights that was all anyone ever chose to see. I watched how she placed a hand on a shoulder, held a gaze a beat longer, and slipped a compliment that felt like a gift. By the time it reached the heart, the compliment had already decided who stood above whom. In our family, she was the standard measure. My parents told stories about her with the easy pride of people who wanted to believe they had won at parenting. Relatives repeated those stories until they hardened into truth. When I entered the room, I could feel the temperature shift if she was already there. Her smile spread warmth, and that warmth pulled eyes in like a tide. I learned to stand in that shadow without making a sound. As children, we were once inseparable. We shared a bed during summer storms and traded secrets that felt too big for our age. I looked up to her because she seemed to know how the world worked. Admiration became a path I walked without thinking. The first time I noticed the change was small. She teased me in front of friends and then laughed it off as play. I laughed too, but a piece of me stayed behind and watched. Words were always her first weapon. She knew how to wrap a jab in silk so it looked like a ribbon. She could praise my effort while suggesting that effort was all I had. She could thank me for my service while reminding the table that I liked danger more than good judgment. No one called it cruelty because she smiled when she said it. I learned that a blade does not need to show its edge to cut. In public, she collected influence like some people collect art. She married into money and built a company with speed that turned heads. Charities asked her to sit on their boards. Politicians greeted her by name. She knew where to stand in a photo and how to turn a room into a stage. When people looked at me, they saw the family resemblance, and then they looked back at her. It was not jealousy that stung most. It was how easily the world agreed with her version of me. At home, she rewrote the script of who we were. If I shared a win, she shaped it into a phase I would soon outgrow. If I asked for advice, she reminded me that advice had a cost. My parents tried to keep the peace, which meant they tried to keep her happy. I cannot blame them for wanting harmony, but harmony built on silence is only quiet, not peace. I learned to nod, to breathe, and to keep score in the private ledger of my chest. What I carried back from the field did not fit her story. In uniform, I learned that respect is earned in hard moments and not from applause. That kind of respect does not translate well to cocktail hours. She sensed that gap and filled it with doubt dressed as concern. She met people who could shape my future and told them softly that I was brave, then told them quietly that I was reckless. The effect was slow and tidy, like a leak you do not notice until the floor is warped. There were times I tried to reach the girl I once knew. I remembered her braiding my hair before school and standing in front of bullies with a chin held high. I wondered if the years had layered something hard over her that even she could not peel back. I also wondered if I had helped put it there by admiring her for too long. Reflection did not erase the sting, but it kept me from turning into a mirror image of what I faced. Setting her up as the antagonist is not hard. She gives the world a beautiful performance, and behind it she does what she must to keep the spotlight. Her cruelty rarely arrives loud. It lands as a favor, a joke, a helpful note. She pushes and then smiles while people call it charm. I spent years thinking survival meant staying small. What I learned instead was simple. Shadows stretch only when there is light. The battlefield teaches lessons that never leave you. You learn that discipline is not an idea, it is survival. Every movement, every decision carries weight because hesitation can cost lives. Out there, the chain of command is not about ego, but about trust. You follow orders because you know the person giving them carries the same risk you do. That kind of clarity strips away pretense. In the desert heat, with the weight of gear pressing on your shoulders, you discover what unity really means. A soldier does not fight alone. You rely on the one next to you, knowing they rely on you just as fiercely. Respect is not given because of family name or charm. It is earned in sweat, grit, and the quiet strength of showing up when fear is loud. On the line, no one cares who tells the best story. They care who covers their flank when the ground shakes. What struck me later was how honest combat felt compared to family politics. In war, the threat is visible. You see the enemy, you feel the danger, and you know what is at stake. Betrayal at home cuts deeper because it hides behind a smile. A sister's words can wound in ways a bullet never could because no armor prepares you for it. I carried scars from both, but only one made me doubt the ground beneath my feet. Those years in uniform shaped how I walked into every room afterward. I learned to keep my face steady even when storms raged inside. I learned that silence can be strength, that patience can be a weapon sharper than rage. The battlefield forged endurance, and that endurance became my shield in family gatherings that felt more like ambushes. Out there, I fought to survive. Back home, I fought to hold on to who I was. Both wars taught me the same truth. Discipline is not just about living through the fight. It is about refusing to surrender yourself to it. Betrayal does not always arrive with shouting or broken glass. Sometimes it slips in quietly, disguised as concern, spoken in soft tones that sound almost protective. My sister had a gift for that. She could praise me in front of a room and then, with the next breath, plant a seed of doubt that grew long after the applause ended. I would hear later that someone important had questions about my judgment, questions that always seemed to trace back to her circles of influence. The hardest part was not the sabotage itself, but the way it was received. People believed her because she looked so certain, so composed, while I stood there wondering how to fight whispers. In uniform, my record was clean, my service respected, yet at home I could feel the ground shifting under me. Every rumor added weight, bending the path I had worked to climb. By the time I realized how deliberate it was, the damage had already set. These wounds carried no scars anyone could see. On paper, my life still looked steady. I was teaching cadets, shaping young officers, doing work that others envied, but I knew the truth of how I had been placed there. It was a reassignment built from manipulation, a polite way of pushing me to the side. The same sister who toasted me with charm had quietly painted me as reckless in rooms where decisions about my future were made. What cut deepest was not losing ground in my career. It was the silence of those closest to me. My parents heard the jokes, saw the digs, and chose to laugh along rather than confront her. Friends repeated her lines, not realizing they were sharpening a blade she had aimed at me. I had survived war zones where danger was clear, yet it was the quiet, invisible kind of betrayal that weighed heavier than any rifle I had ever carried. Family is supposed to protect you. When they wound you instead, the pain follows you everywhere. The lights dipped as the band softened their song. I felt the room lean toward the small stage where the microphone waited. The glass walls reflected rows of dressed faces that watched like an audience ready for a final act. She stepped into the reflection with that careful smile. It was steady and polished, the smile that had opened doors for her all our lives. Applause came in a gentle wave as if pulled by a tide she controlled without effort. Her voice moved through the ballroom with a practiced ease. Every word arrived wrapped in satin, then unraveled into something colder. She praised the night, praised the guests, and then shaped me into a story that sounded sweet while bending my spine. People laughed at the places she wanted them to laugh. They tilted their heads when she feigned concern. She spoke of worry, of reckless choices, of a sister who always ran toward fire as if it were a hobby rather than a duty. The air felt heavy, like a storm that refuses to break. I saw my mother smile too quickly and my father adjust his cuff as if that could fix what sat between us. The floor beneath my heels felt thin as glass, and I knew glass does not warn you before it cracks. She glanced at me the way a performer checks a mark on the stage. It was a quick look, but it carried the weight of a cue. The message was simple: stay in your place, keep the mask on, play the part written for you. I held the stem of my glass and listened. The edges of her compliments cut like small blades. She told the room I was brave, then painted bravery as poor judgment. She told them I had returned stronger, then added that strength suits a classroom better than a field where real choices are made. The laughter thinned and turned into a hush that spread like fog. Some guests sensed the shift without knowing why. Others watched with bright eyes, hungry for the moment when Polish might not be enough to hold everything together. I thought of years when words like these scattered behind me like tacks on a road. I thought of the times I picked them out of my feet and kept walking, pretending pain was not pain. The habit of silence had become a uniform I wore even when I was out of uniform. She kept speaking, and the chandelier light shimmered across the crystal like a river that hides a drop. The mask of the room began to slip, not in a fall, but in a slow slide that revealed a jawline beneath the powder. You could feel people breathe a little shorter, as if air now carried a cost. The city lights outside made a second audience in the glass. They looked like distant eyes that had seen this story before. Inside, the script pressed toward its next scene, and I felt the pull of a choice that would not wait. A truth rose in me with the steadiness of a drill command. The cracks were not content to live under varnish anymore. They wanted daylight because daylight does not ask for permission. I remembered the field where decisions came fast and honestly. I remembered the faces I had led through fire and the promise I carried to honor what is real. That promise did not expire at a ballroom door. She lifted her chin and finished a line that asked the room to pity me. The pity was a trap that looked like a cushion. I saw hands fold and eyes soften, and I understood how easy it would be to sink into that soft place and vanish. I set the glass down and felt the table steady under my palm. The choice arrived like a clean breath. I would no longer hold the mask in place to save a peace that harmed me. The silence after her last word was not the silence that follows applause. It was the silence of a room that knows a curtain is about to move. I straightened my shoulders and let the weight of my decisions settle where fear once lived. The shadows in that room had done their quiet work for years. Tonight they demanded to be seen. I gave them my answer and stepped forward. She stood at the microphone in her emerald dress, a jewel placed carefully at the center of the room. The light caught her hair just right. The crowd leaned closer, and her smile carried the same calm dominance it always had. Her voice began with warmth, thanking everyone for coming, but it quickly turned into something sharper. She praised me for my service and then reminded them it was reckless. She spoke of her worry, of nights spent imagining me lost on the other side of the world, and the words wrapped me in pity I had not asked for. The room laughed when she wanted them to laugh. They nodded when she paused for sympathy. Each line was designed to reduce me while lifting her higher. To the crowd it sounded like affectionate teasing, but to me it was the same performance I had endured for years. Her words carried no blade you could see, but they cut clean and left no trace except in the way people began to look at me differently. I felt the weight of my uniform even though I was not on duty. Years of holding steady taught me how to keep my face calm while fire burned under my skin. I thought of the battlefield, where enemies came at you honestly, and realized how cruel it felt to be ambushed in a place that called itself home. I looked at my father, who stared into his drink. I looked at my mother, who patted her hand as if rewarding a clever line. No one would step in. No one ever did. Her eyes flicked toward me, daring me to react. She thrived on that tension, knowing the game was hers if I kept silent. The room swelled with her voice, with her charm, with her power that looked effortless but was sharpened by practice. Then, with a casual lift of her glass, she added the final line. It was a reminder that I was safer now, teaching in a classroom rather than chasing battles I had no business fighting. The laugh that followed spread like a ripple of approval across the tables. I stood, not because I wanted to, but because something in me refused to stay seated. My chair scraped against the marble, and the sound pulled my eyes toward me. She turned to face me with a smile already shaped like victory. Her hand moved before her words could. The slap rang out in the silence, a sound so sharp it swallowed every other noise in the ballroom. For a moment, the world stopped. The burn spread across my cheek, but the pain was nothing compared to the echo of humiliation. I saw faces frozen in shock, glasses paused mid-air, and cameras hesitating to click. It should have broken me, left me standing small in her shadow once again. Instead, something entirely different rose in me. The laugh started quiet, almost unintentional, but it grew until it filled the silence she had created. It was not the laugh of surrender. It was not the laugh of someone pretending it was all in good fun. It was the laugh of recognition, of a truth too long ignored, of power reclaimed at the moment she thought she had taken it. The sound unsettled the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to join in or stay still. My sister's smile faltered for the first time. She had struck me expecting silence or shame, but she had not expected laughter that carried no bitterness, only freedom. The mask she wore cracked under the weight of it, and people saw the edges of her cruelty where charm used to hide. I raised my glass slowly, steady as if nothing had touched me. My eyes met hers, and I let the laugh settle into a smile she could not control. Around us, the room began to murmur, whispers flowing like a tide she could no longer command. Her stage had shifted, her dominance slipping away in the simplest of ways. At that moment, I understood that laughter could be sharper than any blade. It stripped her of her weapon, exposed her game, and forced everyone to see what I had seen for years. Power had never been in her words or her strikes. It had always been in how I chose to respond. That night, my response rewrote the story she had tried to own. The slap echoed long after the sound faded. My cheek still burned, but the silence in the ballroom carried more weight than the strike itself. Eyes darted between us, searching for a script that no longer existed. What they saw was not me wounded, but me standing steady, glass in hand, with laughter still lingering like a challenge no one could dismiss. My sister tried to reclaim the moment with a smile, but the edges had cracked. Her charm, once effortless, now looked forced. The crowd began to shift. Conversations lowered into whispers, glances turned sharper, and the air held the unease of people realizing they had applauded cruelty. Masks could no longer cover what had been exposed. My parents avoided my eyes. My father cleared his throat, my mother sipped her wine too quickly, but even they could not restore the illusion. For years they had chosen silence, but tonight silence no longer shielded her. Guests who once laughed along kept their smiles tucked away. They had seen too much. The room itself felt different, as though the chandeliers had dimmed to reveal the truth beneath the shine. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to defend myself with anger or long explanations. My composure was enough. By laughing, by refusing to bow, I had turned her strike into her own undoing. In that calm, I felt a power deeper than applause or recognition. Dignity did not shout. It stood steady and waited for others to see what had been there all along. Family is supposed to be the place where you are safe. It is where you should be seen for who you are, not measured against who someone else decides you should be. But blood alone does not guarantee that kind of loyalty. Sometimes the ones closest to you are the very people who cut the deepest. That is when you begin to ask what family really means. I learned that loyalty without truth is only silence. Keeping peace at the cost of honesty is not love. It is fear dressed up as devotion. A real family shows up when standing with you costs them something. They are the ones who take the risk of losing comfort in order to protect what is right. Looking back, I see that loyalty is not proven by sharing a last name. It is proven in the moments when someone chooses your dignity over their own convenience. That kind of loyalty does not need applause. It shows itself in action. And once you recognize the difference, you stop mistaking blood ties for bonds. You start building your circle around truth, and in that circle you finally understand what family is. Discipline begins as a habit of survival. In the military, it is the difference between chaos and order, between fear and action. But over time, I learned it was more than drills or commands. It became a way of living that reached deeper than the battlefield. True discipline is the choice to hold steady when emotion wants to take control. It is the pause before you speak, the calm when others are loud, the steady step when the ground shakes. Discipline is presence. It is knowing that your worth does not depend on how others treat you, but on how you choose to stand. This kind of discipline is not just about war. It is a spiritual power that protects you from manipulation and fear. It gives you the strength to resist lies that sound sweet and pressures that demand silence. Discipline is integrity in action. It keeps you whole when everything around you pulls at the seams. And once you understand it, you see it not as a burden, but as freedom. Victory did not arrive with applause. It was not in the silence that followed her slap or in the whispers that filled the room after my laughter. The real victory was knowing the truth no longer hid in the shadows. What she had tried to bury stood in the open for all to see. And in that clarity, I felt free in a way revenge could never offer. Honor is not something anyone can hand you. It is not measured by who claps for you or who doubts you. It lives in the choices you make when pressure is heavy, and the easy way out would be silence. Dignity is not loud, it is steady. It is the calm voice inside that says, "You will not let someone else decide your worth." As I look back, I see that strength is not about striking harder. It is about refusing to be broken. The laugh was not defiance for its own sake. It was proof that truth, once revealed, cannot be taken back. I invite you to think about your own moments of betrayal, the times when you chose integrity over fear. Share those stories, because every act of honesty builds a kind of freedom no one can steal.